I stood in the middle of the grand living room, the house that had never really felt like home, staring at my father. The weight of everything I was leaving behind settled over me like a thick fog, and I couldn't breathe. I had just walked across the stage to accept my degree in mechanical engineering, a degree I'd earned alone, while my family didn't even bother to show up. Mechanical engineering, my dad sneered, his voice like ice. What a waste of a degree. You could have been running the family business, Daniel. Instead, you're throwing it all away. You're a disappointment. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to lash out. He didn't get it, not really. He'd never gotten me. He pulled $100 bill from his wallet and flicked it at me like I was a beggar. The crisp paper fluttered to the floor at my feet, and I picked it up, forcing myself to keep my cool. You're no longer part of this family, he spat, as if his words could somehow sever all the ties that had already been rotting for years. My mom, standing off to the side with her arms crossed and her face unreadable, finally spoke. Daniel, this is your last chance. You could still come back, join the firm, work your way up. Her voice was cold, detached, like she was offering me a business deal, not a lifeline. I shook my head. I'm done, I said, every word a final nail in the coffin. I'm not going back. Without another word, I grabbed the 100, shoved it in my pocket, and turned toward the door. I was walking away from all of it, the expectations, the rules, the suffocating grip of a family that never saw me as anything more than a tool to make their empire bigger. I couldn't stay one more minute. The gates of the Blake Capitol gate slammed shut behind me, the sound echoing in my chest like a final goodbye. I didn't have a car, didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't even have enough money to make it through the night, but that didn't matter. I was free, I was finally out. The only thing I had left was my degree, a suitcase, and a laptop. It was more than I had ever had in that house. I took a deep breath, letting the cool air hit my face. There was no turning back now. I spent that first night on a bench in Palo Alto, curled up as best as I could, with nothing but my suitcase for a pillow. It wasn't the kind of thing you plan for, but somehow, there I was. The streets were quieter than I expected, peaceful even, but the loneliness was a different kind of loud. I could hear every car that passed, every footstep that got too close, like the world was reminding me that I didn't belong, not anymore. Morning came too quickly. I shook myself awake, tried to smooth out the wrinkles in my shirt, and dragged my feet down the sidewalk. I didn't have anywhere to go, and honestly, I wasn't sure what I was doing. I needed to figure something out, and fast. I had no car, no job, no backup plan. I had a degree in my pocket, but that didn't mean a damn thing right now. I wandered into a small cafe, one of those local spots that looked like it belonged in an indie movie. The kind with mismatched furniture, the smell of coffee thick in the air, and old-school jazz playing low enough to feel like background noise instead of music. I slipped into a seat by the window, plugged in my laptop, and tried to act like I had it all together. It wasn't long before the barista, a girl maybe a few years older than me, noticed me sitting there, staring blankly at the screen. She had dark hair pulled into a messy bun and a sharp look in her eye. "Hey," she said, her tone casual but pointed. "You need something, or are you just here to use the Wi-Fi?" I felt the heat rise in my face, not wanting to admit I was basically just taking up space, but I said, yeah, just using the internet for a bit." She gave me a long look, like she was deciding whether or not to call me out. Then she raised an eyebrow and asked, "You good for money?" I blinked, a little caught off guard. I was too proud to admit I was flat broke. "Yeah," I lied, pulling my laptop closer to my chest. "Just needed somewhere to work." She didn't buy it. "Right, sure." Then, after a beat, she added, "Look, the espresso machine's been on the fritz for a while. If you're really good with tech, maybe you could take a look at it. I'll let you stay in the storage room for the night in exchange. No charge for the Wi-Fi." I stared at her for a second, not sure if I'd heard her right. "You want me to fix your espresso machine?" She nodded, clearly not joking. "If you're as good as you look, sure, fix it, and you can crash in the back. I don't care what you do with your time during the day, but you need somewhere to sleep, right? This isn't exactly a 5-star hotel, but it's better than a park bench." I didn't hesitate. "Deal." I spent the next couple of hours getting under the espresso machine, poking around until I found the issue. A busted circuit board. It took me maybe 10 minutes to get it working again, the whole process like muscle memory from the things I'd tinkered with back in my college dorm. When I finished, the machine purred to life. steam rising in the most satisfying way. Maya, the barista, gave me a small, approving smile. Guess I owe you one. I'll tell the owner we're good. The owner, an older guy with tired eyes, walked over and nodded. You fixed it? Nice. You need a job? We're always short-handed. I didn't even have to think. Yeah, I can do mornings, nights, whatever. He agreed right away, shaking my hand and telling me to show up the next day. They gave me a part-time job behind the counter, pouring coffee and cleaning up. It wasn't much, but it was something. That night, I made my bed in the storage room, a tiny, cold space with just enough room for a worn-out couch and some cleaning supplies. I plugged in my laptop and started working on my sketch, the thing I couldn't shake, the energy storage system I'd been thinking about since my final year in college, the thing that had kept me up nights, even when I was supposed to be studying for exams. Maya must have noticed me sketching because she wandered back into the storage room one evening, coffee in hand. What's that? I looked at the page, trying to explain it without sounding like a total nerd. It's a concept for an energy storage system, high efficiency, something that could, well, change how we store power. She stared at it for a long moment, then asked, Okay, but what's the big deal? I mean, it looks cool, but how does it actually work? I felt the fire light up in my chest. This wasn't just some hobby, it was everything. The idea is to create a molecular-level design that increases energy retention. Basically, it'd be a battery that doesn't lose power over time, stays stable, and charges faster. It could revolutionize the whole industry: clean energy, storage, electric cars, everything. Maya didn't nod and pretend to understand. She asked real questions, dug into the details. It was like she cared, like she believed in it more than I did. And that made me want to make it real, not just a theory scribbled on a napkin. She leaned over the table one night, a cup of coffee in her hand, and said, Okay, so explain it to me like I'm 5. What's the next step? I started talking. I didn't stop until I had something concrete to work with. By the time I was done, I knew that this was the thing I needed to build. And maybe, just maybe, it was the thing that could get me out of this mess. We spent nights working together, refining the idea, testing it out. And slowly, it stopped being just a dream. It became a mission. And I would make it happen, no matter what. I didn't have a place to stay for long, so after a couple weeks of working at the cafe, I rented a room in a shared house with a bunch of other tech hopefuls. The house was cheap, but it had a vibe to it, kind of like a startup incubator where everyone was too broke to pay rent, but too ambitious to leave. The walls were thin, the kitchen was always a disaster, and the Wi-Fi was slow, but it didn't matter. It was enough to get me by, and at least I wasn't sleeping on a park bench anymore. I picked up freelance gigs wherever I could, consulting on software, fixing machines, whatever people needed. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me afloat. The money was barely enough to cover rent and food, but it gave me the space I needed to focus on my real goal, my battery design. I spent my nights in the shared living room, scribbling ideas on napkins, using the slow internet to dig deeper into energy storage systems. It wasn't a life, but it was a start. Then one afternoon, I got an email from a guy named David Chin. He was a startup founder, and he had a few questions about some work I'd done on a freelance project for a friend of a friend. I didn't expect much, probably just another gig to add to the list. But when we met, I saw something in his eyes I didn't see often: genuine interest. "You're Daniel Blake, right?" he asked, shaking my hand. "Yeah," I said, trying not to sound too eager. "That's me." David didn't waste time. He sat down across from me, looking at me with the kind of intensity that felt like he was analyzing every word I said. "I looked through your portfolio. You've got something here. I mean, really something." I didn't know if he was being polite or if he meant it, but it didn't matter. I wasn't about to let the chance slip by. "I'm working on something. It's a battery design, high-efficiency energy storage system," I said, getting straight to the point. "It's not finished yet, but it's close." David leaned forward, his eyes lighting up. "Energy storage, high efficiency, that's huge. You mind showing me?" I pulled out the sketches and the models I'd been working on, pieces of a puzzle I hadn't figured out how to complete. I started explaining it, how it could change the way we store power, how it could make solar energy truly sustainable. David didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, he stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, This is something. You're onto something big, man. I don't know if you realize how big." I just nodded. I've been trying to make it work, but I don't have the resources I need, the lab space, the equipment. Yeah, he said, cutting me off. That's why I'm calling in a favor. I've got someone who could be interested. Dr. Sarah Wong over at Berkeley. She's the real deal, man. She'll know what you're talking about. I'll set up a meeting. I almost couldn't believe it. Dr. Sarah Wong, the Berkeley researcher? My mind raced. I'd read about her in journals, seen her work on energy storage, and now she was going to look at mine. It wasn't until the meeting with Dr. Wong that I realized how much I didn't know. She grilled me on the technical aspects of the design, asking questions that went deeper than I'd ever been able to answer. I felt like I was back in college, sitting through one of those brutal exams where you can't stop sweating and hoping you don't say something dumb. But I held my ground, gave her the data I had, explained the concepts in the most technical way I could. At the end of it all, Dr. Wong looked at me for a long time, her expression unreadable. "You're onto something here, Daniel," she said finally. "It's rough, but I can help you refine it. You need lab space. You need the right equipment. I can offer you access to the Berkeley Energy Research Center. You'll have the tools you need to take this to the next level." I almost didn't hear her words over the pounding in my head. I had a chance, real resources to work with. It wasn't just a shot in the dark anymore. This was my moment. I didn't sleep much that night. I barely slept for weeks after that. I was running on adrenaline, freelance gigs during the day, cafe shifts at night, and every free second I could squeeze in at the lab. I was barely keeping my head above water, but I didn't care. I was so close. Every night I'd tweak the design, make small adjustments, run simulations in the lab at Berkeley, and then crash for a few hours before starting all over again. Maya noticed. She always noticed. She saw the exhaustion on my face, the way my hands shook when I hadn't eaten for too long. She never said much about it, but every now and then, she'd bring me a coffee from the cafe or just sit with me in the quiet hours, no words needed. Her support wasn't just practical. It was the only thing that kept me going some days. She didn't have to believe in me, but she did, and that meant everything. I was drowning in work, but every small victory, every breakthrough made it worth it. The world didn't care about me yet, but that was fine. I didn't care about the world. I cared about the design. I cared about making it real. It was a year of grinding, of sleepless nights, and barely surviving on takeout coffee and cold pizza. I'd spent months adjusting the molecular structure, rerunning simulations, and tinkering with the design at the Berkeley lab until my brain felt like it was about to implode. Every time I thought I was close, I hit a wall. But I couldn't stop, not now. And then, one night, I cracked it. I ran the final test, my hands trembling as I hit enter. The numbers flashed on the screen, 98.7% efficiency, almost double the industry standard. I stared at it, disbelieving, for a long time. It was real. I had done it. The breakthrough was right there, in front of me. I couldn't even focus on the details of the result. I had to make sure it wasn't a glitch, so I ran it again. And again. Each time, the result was the same, 98.7%. This was it. This was the moment. I called Dr. Wong immediately, my voice shaking as I relayed the numbers. She'd always been a skeptic, a realist, but even she sounded excited when she replied, "You've got it. Daniel, you've actually got it." The next day, she verified everything in her own lab. She spent hours checking the data, testing the model with her equipment. When she came back to me, there was no doubt in her voice. "You've done what no one thought was possible. This is groundbreaking." Her approval meant everything, but the real challenge was still ahead, getting investors to believe in it. Dr. Wong introduced me to a few venture capital firms, some of the biggest in the industry. I spent the next few weeks rehearsing my pitch, tweaking the presentation with Maya. She'd become more than just someone who helped me through the tough times. She was the first person who really understood the energy storage concept, and she pushed me to explain it better, clearer, sharper. "You've got to make them see it," she told me one night, leaning over my laptop. "You've got to sell them on why it matters, not just the numbers. They need to feel the impact." I spent days refining the pitch, sharpening the language, cutting out the fluff. It wasn't just a battery, it was the future. It could change everything: clean energy, electric cars, industries that had been stuck for decades. When I was finally ready, Maya sat in on my first pitch, listening intently. I spoke with the kind of urgency I hadn't felt before, knowing that this was my only shot. The first meeting went well, or at least I thought it did. I explained everything, all the science, the numbers, the potential for disruption. The partners at the firm were impressed with the efficiency, but when the conversation turned to projections, they got cold feet. "I don't know," one of them said, tapping his pen nervously. "It's too early, too risky." The rejection stung, but I didn't let it show. I just nodded, thanked them, and walked out. One down. The second firm was even worse. They didn't even let me finish before they dismissed me. "Great idea, but we're looking for more immediate returns," they said. "This isn't the kind of thing that's going to pay off in a year or two." I wanted to tell them they didn't get it, that they couldn't see what was right in front of them, but I didn't. I just packed up my stuff and left. By the time I got to my third meeting, I was starting to wonder if I was going to make it at all. But I didn't let that show either. When I walked into the boardroom at Quantum Ventures, I had one goal: make them see what I'd built, make them understand how close we were to changing everything. I didn't even have to pitch the whole thing. The moment I showed them the prototype data and explained the energy efficiency, their faces lit up. It was a different vibe this time, less skepticism, more intrigue. When I finished, the lead investor, a guy named Elliot, looked at me and nodded slowly. "This is impressive," he said, his voice deliberate. "Very impressive. We want to be a part of this." I thought I'd misheard him. "What?" "We're prepared to offer $5 million for 25% equity," he said without hesitation. "We believe in what you're doing, Daniel. You've got something big here." I couldn't even process it at first. $5 million, 25%. That was real money. That was a shot at making this a reality. I couldn't keep the grin off my face. Deal. That was the moment everything changed. With that money, I could build the team I needed, scale up, and make the vision a reality. I'd spent the last year working in the shadows, fighting for every inch. Now, I had the resources to take it all the way. I named the company Nova Energy Systems. It felt right, like a nod to new beginnings, to everything I'd been through to get here. It wasn't just about the technology anymore. It was about building something that could make a real difference. The team came together quickly. Engineers, business strategists, designers, people who believed in the vision, who wanted to be part of something bigger than just a paycheck. Maya, of course, was at the heart of it all, helping me keep everything grounded. She was no longer just my sounding board. She was my closest confidant, the one who had seen me through every failure, every rejection. It was happening. Nova Energy Systems was no longer just a concept. It was real. Nova Energy Systems didn't just grow, it exploded. From the moment we secured the funding, it felt like we were playing catch-up, barely keeping pace with how fast things were moving. My team and I worked around the clock, tweaking and refining the technology, improving the efficiency little by little. Every breakthrough was followed by a dozen more challenges, but we were on a mission. It didn't feel like a job. It felt like something bigger, something world-changing. By the time we hit the 2-year mark after founding Nova Energy Systems, our product was at 99.1% efficiency. Almost perfect. Perfect. We had set a new global standard for energy storage, and the implications were huge. The fossil fuel market was already on edge, and this only pushed them further. Clean energy was no longer a far-off ideal. It was here, and it was capable of replacing fossil fuels on a massive scale. The world noticed. Governments started calling. Private energy firms were knocking down our door, wanting to buy in, wanting a piece of what we were doing. My inbox was flooded with inquiries from all over the globe. Everyone wanted to be part of Nova's rise. And it wasn't just talk anymore. We had traction. Investors were lined up, eager to get in before it went public. The demand for our product was through the roof. The decision to go public was a no-brainer. A few months later, Nova Energy Systems hit the stock market, and within 3 years, my personal stake was over $100 million. The kind of money I'd never imagined and still couldn't wrap my head around. But even with that kind of success, I kept my head in the game. The numbers, the profits, the public praise, it didn't matter. The mission was still the same: to revolutionize energy storage, to shift the world toward clean power. In the midst of everything, Maya had grown with the company. She was no longer just a part-time barista. She was head of operations now, handling logistics, managing teams, making sure everything ran smoothly. Her role was more than just a job to her. It was just as personal as it was to me. We had a big investor meeting coming up, and I needed a suit. I never had to wear one at the Blake family firm. Back then, they thought the only thing that mattered was your last name, not what you could build. But things were different now. I'd been through too much to ignore the details. Maya and I were at the tailor's, sorting through options. She picked up a black suit jacket and held it up, eyeing me critically. "You've got to look the part," she said, as she buttoned it over my chest. "But not like you're trying too hard. Keep it sharp. Keep it you." I nodded, running my hands over the fabric. It felt strange. I'd been living in jeans and t-shirts for years, grinding, working in the trenches. But now the world was watching. The suit wasn't just about appearances. It was about owning the space I'd built for myself. As the tailor adjusted the sleeves, Maya dropped a quiet bombshell. "You know, we've come a long way, but you've always had a bigger plan. What's next?" I glanced at her, knowing exactly what she meant. The weight of the question hung in the air between us, heavier than the fabric of the suit. I took a deep breath and met her eyes. "I'm going back," I said. "Back to Blake Capital." She frowned, clearly confused. "Why? You've built all this. Why go back to them?" I looked down for a moment, letting the idea settle in my mind before speaking again. "Because they need to learn what I learned. They need to know that they can't just throw people away. I'm going back to buy them out. All of it." Maya let out a breath, her eyes searching my face for any sign that I was joking. But there was none. I wasn't. I was deadly serious. "You're going to buy them out?" she repeated, her voice low, as if trying to gauge if I was kidding. "Yeah," I said, the words feeling more solid with every second. "They taught me that the only way to win is to make your own rules. They said I'd never amount to anything. Now, I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to take everything they built and turn it into something better." She smiled. "And you're going to do it with the suit?" she teased, adjusting the jacket one last time. "Or you'll be naked under it?" "Maybe both," I said with a grin. She laughed, but I could see the weight of it in her eyes too. The truth was, this wasn't just about a business deal. It wasn't about revenge either. It was about reshaping everything I had walked away from. I was going to buy the company that had thrown me out, but I wasn't going to tear it down. I was going to make it relevant again. And maybe, just maybe, I'd show them how wrong they were. "Let's get it done," Maya said, her voice steady and sure. It was all she needed to say. We were in this together. The meeting was set, the suit was ready, and everything was about to change. Again. I stood in front of the Blake family firm's headquarters, watching the tall glass building that had once been a symbol of power now look worn down, faded. It wasn't the gleaming empire I remembered, not anymore. The marble floors had cracks, and the lobby smelled like stale air, as if the place had been holding its breath for years, waiting for something to change. I hadn't stepped foot in this building in years. The last time I was here, it felt like I was the one suffocating. Now, it felt more like a tomb, a relic of a time I'd left behind. Inside, I was led past familiar hallways, past offices that hadn't changed since I left. My father's office still had that cold, imposing feel to it. Wood paneling and heavy leather chairs, the kind of place that tried to make you feel small. I was sure Richard Blake still sat behind that desk, thinking he controlled everything around him. But that was the old world, the one that had tossed me out. The new world, it was mine. The boardroom was even worse, desolate. There were a few familiar faces around the table, all looking tired, the weight of their failing business bearing down on them. They probably never thought someone like me would walk through that door again, especially not under the name Daniel Blake. But that's who I was now, Daniel Blake, a man with a vision and the power to back it up. I sat down across from them, and they glanced at me, some of them trying to place me, but none of them said anything. Richard hadn't noticed me yet, too busy thumbing through some papers, probably worrying about the company's dwindling assets. I let the silence hang there, letting it stretch out until it became uncomfortable. Finally, I spoke. "I'm Daniel Blake. I'm the founder of Nova Energy Systems." A few heads snapped up at the name. The confusion on their faces was palpable. Richard looked up last, his eyes narrowing, trying to figure out where he'd seen me before. He squinted like he was looking at some memory he couldn't place. When the recognition finally hit him, his expression morphed from confusion to disbelief. His eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw something in his face that wasn't smug superiority. It was shock. "You," he started, his voice cracking. "You're..." Yes, I said, cutting him off. I'm your son, Daniel. There was a long, stunned pause. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The board was silent, all of them watching him, watching me. I should have known, Richard sputtered, his voice trying to regain some of its old authority. This is some kind of trick. You think you can just walk in here and... I held up a hand, silencing him. It's not a trick, Dad. It's reality. I pulled a folder from my bag and slid it across the table. You're holding on by a thread. You're hemorrhaging money, but it's worse than you think. I let them sit with that for a moment. Then I hit them with the real bombshell. We already own 45% of Blake Capital, I said, letting the weight of those words settle in the room. And we control most of your debt. We've been biding our time. You have 24 hours to accept our acquisition offer, or this place is done. The room was dead silent for a long time. I could feel Richard's eyes burning into me, but I didn't flinch. He looked like he was trying to find some way to argue, some way to hold on to whatever scraps of control he still had. His hands clenched into fists on the table. You're making a huge mistake. This company has a legacy. It's mine. It's always been mine. You can't just... I cut him off again. You're right. It's always been yours. But you know what you taught me? You taught me that people like you don't build anything. You just maintain what's already there. And in the process, you crush anyone who tries to build something better. I looked directly at him, my voice cold and even. You gave me the lesson, Dad. I just built something better. The board was staring at me now, some with shock, some with disbelief, and a few who looked like they might actually be relieved. Richard sputtered a few more words, but none of them made sense. He wasn't even making a real argument anymore, just grasping at whatever power he thought he still had. I stood up, ready to leave. You've got 24 hours, I repeated, voice steady. And if you don't accept, it's over. I'll take everything, and I'll turn it into something that actually matters. I turned and walked out of that room like I owned it, and for all intents and purposes, I did. As the elevator doors closed behind me, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. It wasn't about revenge. It was about rightness. What I was doing wasn't about winning some petty battle. It was about taking something broken and making it whole again. And I was damn sure I was the one who could do it. Now, it was just a matter of time. And when that 24-hour mark came, there was no turning back. I spent the next day watching. I didn't have to do much. My father's empire was falling apart on its own. I sat back and let the chaos unfold from the sidelines, as Richard scrambled to find some way to hold it all together. He called his lawyers, his board members, his contacts, trying to stitch the pieces of Blake Capital back together. I could almost hear him from my office, barking orders, pleading for help, pretending like it was all still salvageable. But it wasn't. Every call he made, every lifeline he reached for, was cut off. His allies were too scared to side with him anymore, and the ones who had any money left were already backing out. By the time the clock hit 5 p.m., it was over. I sat in a meeting room with the board, my fingers tapping against the table as the papers were signed. The deal was done. The Blake family legacy was officially under my control, but it wasn't like I was there to gloat. It was more like I was picking up the pieces of something that had already crumbled. I knew what I was going to do next, transform this place into something that actually mattered, something that could move the world forward. As soon as the ink dried, Richard asked for a private meeting. I didn't need any more time to think. I was ready for this confrontation. We walked into his office, and I could tell he was trying to hold on to some shred of dignity. He stood there, rigid, hands on his hips, like he was trying to make himself look bigger, more in control than he felt. "You always were a damn disappointment," he said, his voice low but cutting. "You planned this, didn't you? All along. It wasn't just about the money, was it? This was about revenge." I didn't flinch. "No, Dad, it wasn't about revenge. You planned it the day you threw me away. I just finished what you started." He took a step toward me, his face red now, but I didn't step back. "You think you can just take everything from me?" His voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his armor. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not here to destroy it. I'm here to reshape it. I'm going to turn it into something that actually matters. Something that doesn't just make money, but actually does some good in the world. You never cared about that, but I do." He sneered, but there was something hollow in it. "You think you're better than me now? You think you've built something more important than this? I met his eyes. I don't think, I know. By your own rules, I'm worth more than you ever imagined. I could see it hit him then. The weight of what I had built. He was still clinging to some idea of legacy, but I had already left him behind. The silence stretched between us. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the soft buzz of the lights overhead. I waited, letting the words settle. Finally, Richard looked away. You'll never be able to fix this place. You can't make it what it was. I don't want to, I said, my voice quiet now. I want to make it something new, something better. I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, he called after me. You think you're going to fix the world? You're just like everyone else, greedy and selfish. I didn't turn around. Maybe. But at least I'm doing something. You just sat on your ass and watched everything fall apart. I left him there, standing in his office, the remnants of his empire crumbling around him. And as I walked down that hall, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like I'd won. I just felt done. The deal was signed. The legacy was mine now, and there was work to be done. But there was no joy in it, no relief, only the quiet certainty that this was what I was meant to do all along. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something that wasn't for anyone else. It was for me. It was for the future. And it was for the people who'd believed in me, not the ones who'd thrown me away. The next 6 months felt like one long game of chess, every move calculated, every piece strategically placed. Integrating Blake Capital into Nova Energy Systems was no small feat. The old firm, with its outdated practices and crumbling reputation, didn't mesh easily with the clean, forward-thinking direction I had in mind. But I was determined to make it work. I started with the people, keeping as many of the employees as I could. I knew what it was like to be tossed aside. I wasn't going to make the same mistake. We shifted their focus to green tech, transitioning the portfolio into projects that actually mattered. Solar, wind, energy storage, things that could make a difference. The old guard didn't like it. They fought me every step of the way, but I wasn't backing down. The board? They folded as soon as they saw the numbers. There was too much pressure from all sides. Nova was on the rise, and they couldn't afford to ignore that. By the time I was done, we had cut ties with most of the company's outdated investments and refocused on a sustainable future. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Richard retired quietly. I let him keep enough wealth to survive, enough to maintain his dignity, or what little of it was left. But I made sure his influence over the company was gone. He didn't protest. He knew better than to try to push back. I think he saw it too. This wasn't his world anymore. It was mine. In the midst of all that, my mother tried to reach out. She sent emails, called a few times. Each one felt like a reminder of everything I had left behind. She wanted to talk, to clear the air, but I had no interest in it. I didn't want her apologies. She was as much a part of the cold, calculating world I had escaped as my father. I didn't need her approval. Not anymore. The only thing that kept me grounded was Maya. She had started as my cafe ally, someone who saw potential when no one else did. Now, she was more than just a colleague. She was my partner. The loyalty and belief she'd shown me had never wavered. Through the late nights at the office, the endless meetings, the stress of trying to hold everything together, Maya was the constant I could always rely on. She was the one who kept me from burning out, the one who never stopped believing when I couldn't see the way forward. A year passed. The company was thriving. The technology was being adopted globally, and I had finally built something that felt right. Then, one morning, I got a package. No return address, just my name, written in careful handwriting on the front. I opened it, and there it was, $100, the same $100 Richard had tossed at me all those years ago. Along with it was a note. You were worth more than I knew. I sat there for a long time, the weight of those words sinking in. I didn't know how to feel. There was no satisfaction in it, no relief. It wasn't an apology, and it wasn't a victory. It was just acknowledgement. The thing I'd never gotten from him, the thing I'd always wanted but didn't need anymore. I didn't keep the $100. I went to the cafe, the one where it had all started. I walked up to the counter, Maya there as usual, and I tipped it. The same $100. I didn't need to say anything. She knew, we both did. And as I watched her smile and tuck the bill into the jar, I felt something close to closure. The lesson had been learned. Maybe not the way my father had intended, but it didn't matter. I had done it. I had built something of my own. And now I was moving forward. The past was behind me. The future? It was just getting started. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, looking out over Silicon Valley. The view was everything I'd imagined. Endless sprawl, shimmering buildings, the heart of innovation beating in the distance. But it wasn't just the view that made me pause. It was the thought of how far I'd come to get here. From the park bench I'd slept on in Palo Alto, to this office, this company, this life. I thought about that 100ers, the one my father had tossed at me like I was nothing. The money wasn't the point. It wasn't about the dollar amount. It was about what it represented. Rejection. The kind of rejection that feels like a weight, like it's crushing you. But instead of suffocating me, it set me free. I'd built something from nothing, all on my own. That $100 launched me, but it wasn't because I had help. It was because I had nothing left to lose. And that, in a way, was freedom. The industry had changed. Hell, we'd changed it. Energy storage, the technology that had started as a scribbled idea on a napkin, was now driving the future. We were disrupting markets, reshaping entire sectors. Governments and corporations were coming to us for answers. And in the process, we'd created something that mattered, something that could change the world for real. But it wasn't just the industry that had changed. I had changed. And so had the people around me. Maya walked into the office, coffee in hand, and flashed me that familiar grin. She set her cup down on the table beside me, then leaned against the window frame, her eyes following mine as I stared out at the valley below. She didn't say anything at first. She didn't have to. We both knew where we were. We'd made it. "You're looking at it like it's a foreign country," she said, nodding toward the blueprint I'd been studying. I smiled, a little tired but content. It's hard not to. It feels unreal sometimes. She took a sip of her coffee, then set it down on the desk. "I can't believe how far we've come," she said, her voice steady but full of awe. "I mean, this was a pipe dream, not even 5 years ago." I nodded. "I know, but you never gave up on it. On me." She looked at me, that knowing look in her eyes. "We're a team, always have been." I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the moment settle in. It wasn't triumph I felt. It wasn't some grand victory. It was contentment. The kind that comes when you realize you've reclaimed everything you wanted, not by fighting back, but by building something better than the people who tried to hold you down. "They said money was the only measure of a man," I muttered, more to myself than to Maya. "Turns out it just reveals who he already is." Maya looked at me, raising an eyebrow. "You've always known who you are, though." I glanced at her, her face lit by the afternoon sun, and for the first time, I really understood what she meant. This wasn't about proving anything anymore, not to my father, not to anyone. I wasn't running from my past. I'd accepted it, learned from it, and left it behind. I looked back at the blueprint on my desk. It was for Nova's next project, something even bigger than what we'd already accomplished. It wasn't done yet, not even close. But that was the thing. There would always be more to build, always something new on the horizon. I wasn't done. None of us were. With a deep breath, I stood, pulled the blueprint closer, and started sketching out the next steps. "This," I said to Maya, who had already moved to the window beside me, "this is just the beginning.